I have a question which is for all of you, and that is about Turkey. So we've heard a lot today about new forums, new energy forums, new memorandums of understanding and alliances and so on. Is there a space for Turkey? I completely take on board what the foreign minister of Greece has said. In fact, he said it at our government roundtable in Athens a few weeks ago, said that as long as there's gunboat diplomacy, there isn't a possibility of dialogue or talks or anything else. So putting that aside, and it's very positive that there are moves now towards dialogue, is there a space for Turkey in any of these fora that have been established in the region in the recent period? So maybe I can start with Mr. Fannon to take your view on that.
Yeah. Well, let me be clear. Within the construct of the Eastmed Gas Forum, the United States is going through the process to seek observer status. That only the countries that are exist in the Eastern Mediterranean can be member states to that forum, and I would certainly defer to the minister to speak to that, as Cyprus has a leading role in the forum, and the confederation of how that could go. The United States view is consistent. Turkey is an important country for a lot of reasons. We want to make sure that Turkey sees the opportunity set that it has through a cooperative model. Turkey needs energy. A lot of U.S. LNG finds its way to Turkey. I think it's in everyone's interest for there to be cooperation. They're a huge market. It makes all the sense in the world that they approach in a more collaborative way, cease provocative actions, and come to the table and enjoy the benefits that the rest of the region is enjoying. I think it's certainly not too late. And the United States, through a variety of other channels, is making that encouragement directly and through public interventions. And as I also recognize, Greece has, in the context of the recent joint statement between the United States and Greece with respect to the high-level dialogue that Secretary Pompeo participated in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fannon. Minister Pilides.
Sorry, just unmuted my microphone. Firstly, let me start by thanking Mr. Fannon, not just for the comments that he just made, but also for the US government's very, very, very useful support in exactly communicating to Turkey and to the international community the importance of collaboration within a peaceful environment where we all respect international law and each other's sovereign rights. I think that is extremely important in paving the way towards a more peaceful framework where we can actually start a meaningful conversation. As Mr. Fannon pointed out, the EMGF is a very, very good example of collaboration within the region, which is basically done in good faith and with an open and positive agenda by all parties concerned. It is no accident that the EMGF statute includes provisions for new members, both with observer status, such as the status that the US has expressed interest in, which of course is extremely important and supportive to the effort. The EU has also shown similar interest, and that is also particularly important and meaningful. The EMPF does not exclude anybody as long as the countries that come in, as I said, respect international law and base conversations on the values shared by the different members. So it would be great to have Turkey both join multi-lateral efforts, but also bilateral efforts. And in that regard, we do hope that the recent events and ongoing sort of provocation within REZ will stop, and that following that we can take forward a discussion not just in terms of the challenges and the different matters that arise with regards to the exploitation of gas reserves, but also on a wider and more sort of holistic level in order to find a solution to the Cyprus problem, which of course is the main priority of the Republic of Cyprus.
Thank you very much. Mr. Friedman, I don't know if you have a view on this, or more broadly, actually, just to ask you the question about, are you optimistic about an expansion even of regional cooperation? Lots of unexpected things have happened this year, from the Abraham Accords to the institutionalization and of the as an intergovernmental organisation of the Eastmed Gas Forum. Are you confident that these forums will encourage others who are not yet members or observers to join? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I really have 2 minutes and then I have to leave. So first of all, I'm glad I'm not, I need to take or give political comments. That's not my role. I do think that there is a role for for all the countries in the region to participate in this. And as I've said earlier, I'm a great believer that where there's a real economic, commercial need, right? At the end, politics somehow finds a way, or at least that's, maybe I'm naive, but at least that's how I see things. I think that even a very recent example is there is a block and a potential gas discovery that lies between Israel and Lebanon. As you all know, don't have any diplomatic relationships and consider each other an enemy. And even through U.S. mediation, Israel and Lebanon are going to talk about how to try and monetize and unitize these potential reserves. So there's hope for everyone. And we as a company always said, and it's no secret that we've been in discussion with Turkey as well in the past. And we've always said that our view is, we follow international law, right? So we're not getting into the politics of the issues, and if we see an opportunity, we try and get it, but always follow international laws, international rules, and transparency and discussions with the relevant government. And if I'm optimistic, I'm in the business of being optimistic. You can't be in this business without being optimistic. Think about anyone who's taking $100 million and drilling a hole in the sea. If you're not optimistic, this is the wrong business for you. So yes, I'm optimistic, and I truly believe that we have a great opportunity in front of us, and bringing more countries, more people into this. And again, looking at our very small example of what we've been able to achieve with Egypt and Jordan, which again people both in Israel and in other countries thought was even unimaginable just a couple of years ago, then yes, I'm optimistic. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, and it's been great having you. Thanks for your participation, and see you next time in person, I hope, in New York.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Mr. Maniatis, did you want to comment on that question about Turkey? Is there space for Turkey?
I have three brief remarks. First one, Greece has ever considered Turkey as a potential regional partner. We have supported the European candidacy and course of Turkey. We have also 4 rounds of bilateral high-level cooperation council, which brought the ministerial cabinets and leaders of the two countries much closer. This is my first point. My second point is that all the bilateral or trilateral or multilateral agreements or memoranda that we have signed or participated have a keyword in their articles. The main keyword is that these agreements or memoranda are inclusive and not exclusive, which means that each country that respects the international law of the sea, the United Nations Conference on Law of the Sea, as well as the judgment of the International Court of Justice, of course, can be accepted in all these memoranda or agreements. But this is a basic prerequisite to that we all agree that the international law of the sea is the final referee, let's say, of what each country says. And my third remark is that, as I have already mentioned, there is only one issue to discuss during the exploratory talks between Greece and Turkey, and this is the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone of the continental shelf at full stop. Any other issue is out of discussion and, of course, out of negotiation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We've got a little bit of time, so I've got a few more questions that have come in. So, a question from Mr. Fannon about energy diversification. Why is energy diversification in Europe so important for the US? And is it really realistic to think that Europe can become so much less reliant on Russia? And what about Nord Stream, the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline? It would be good to hear just something about the US position on that, and whether the US is likely to go through with its threats to sanction European companies that are involved in that project.
Yeah, thanks. So with respect to diversification, and that speaks to the Nord Stream 2 question as well, the United States position on calling for a more energy secure, more resilient Europe is longstanding. This has been something that that then President Ronald Reagan was speaking about, and of course we've entered a new era now that there's there's greater degree of optionality away from Russian energy. We talk a lot about gas, and appropriately so, but I would also recognize Russian nuclear energy as well. Whether it's a pipeline or a nuclear plant, this is a 50-year long relationship that Russia seeks to bind itself to countries. And when anyone, there's a psychology of a state when they're dependent on someone else. It calls to question how they'll respond to that state because of the sense of dependency. When there is a lack of optionality to turn away from that, then it changes it affects their foreign policy and their posture in international fora. And I think only till recently do we really have the scale of optionality that exists today. I think we're talking about U.S. LNG in certain instances, and we're certainly supportive of U.S. gas. In fact, about half of all Greece's gas that they're importing from LNG is from the United States now. But this is still new. The United States just started exporting LNG in 2016. And in about 3 years later, we went from the 15th biggest exporter of gas to the third. So the rapidity of what's happening, of this transformation, I think the world is still coming to terms with. Secondly, with respect to nuclear power, we're seeing, just in the case of US LNG, we're also seeing new nuclear energy in the commerciality of small modular reactor design, which is absolutely transformative to the point of and when the minister spoke to the net zero calls and some of these policies in Europe. Globally, firstly, when you have renewables built out at scale, gas is the foundation for that. So there's a new means to do that from the United States, or in the still nascent but very dynamic and developing Eastern Med gas and the interconnectivity that we've talked about. Secondly, zero carbon energy, of which a small modular reactor base load energy could serve, but also in terms of the expansion of renewable energy systems and looking at it in a holistic way and combining these. I also have to say, though, that as we look to do that, it opens up a new threat, a new vulnerability, and that would be in the context of cyber. Because as we increase the interoperability of energy systems, it requires a new approach in terms of grid management and software and inverters, and we calls to question where these are coming from. And so I would just recognize that, given the U.S. position with respect to some of the Chinese 5G technology. So I just thought that's worth noting, because it fits into this bigger Green Deal call and to avoid a new vulnerability. With respect to Nord Stream 2, in July, the Secretary Pompeo updated our guidance pursuant to the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. We have acted pursuant to that updated guidance. CATSA is a discretionary statute which provides considerable latitude in terms of targets. Firstly, I think it's critically important to underscore, we do not want, it is not in our interest, we do not want to sanction any company. But we have also had to respond to the continued escalation of the Kremlin through the course of this time. We've been calling for and cautioning against Nord Stream 2 for some time, but unfortunately the Kremlin continues to escalate their actions, which required a sufficient countermeasure to that. We think that our sanctions is having considerable effect. We know that for certain. Lastly, I would point out, that's no secret, the United States is going through an election. This area with respect to Russian energy dependency and the U.S. Concern about it is something that unifies both Republicans and Democrats, and there's been successive legislation to address this issue. And so we're acting pursuant to the equal independent branch of government, which is the Congress. And I thought that's also worth mentioning. I think this is an evergreen issue regardless of political affiliation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that very full answer. Really appreciate it. Minister Pilides, you mentioned in your introductory remarks about delays that have been experienced with some of the projects because of the whole situation with COVID and difficulties in regulations and so on. I just wondered if you could say a bit more about that, and also about whether this uptick in tensions in the region, in the Eastern Med over the summer, whether that's likely to have an impact as well in terms of delays, whether it's do you think that it's likely to have a negative impact on any investors, potential investors in this field? So it'd just be good to get your view on that. Or do you think that pretty much everything's now moving in the right direction and there's not really much to worry about?
I'll start with the second part of the question. We haven't experienced any delays or any we haven't had any discussions with any of the companies relating to Turkey and its actions and the extent to which that could be a deterring factor. So the discussions have focused clearly on the impact of COVID in terms of the detrimental effect it's had on the market. That is something that was mentioned earlier as well. In terms of the licensees sort of outlook, in that yes, market conditions are fairly bad, I'm afraid, at the moment, and that is certainly a concern and an issue that has been seen to have affected some companies' decisions worldwide. So we've seen that a lot of assets have been spun off or sold by various companies, and we are very fortunate that in Cyprus that has not been the case. All the companies that are in REZ remain in REZ, and although there have been some there has been some postponement in terms of some of the drills that we had planned in 2020. As you said, yes, the plan is that the ones that have been slotted in for 2021 will actually take place. So just to make more specific mention of the different licensees, with Eni and Total, we've had some very sort of positive discussions in terms of the practicalities of how these next drillings will take place. So we're looking forward to taking the discussions forward and actually making plans for the sort of planned drillings in 2021. In regards to Exxon and Qatar Petroleum, again, we have plans for September 2021, which at the moment aren't moving well, and so we hope that also will continue to go as planned, and no further delays will come up. Now, with regards to Noble, Delek, and Shell, as all speakers I think mentioned earlier, the developments with Chevron are extremely important. We do have a slight transitional period that we have to cross now in order to sort of move on to the next stage. So far, we've had no disruption because Noble has continued to carry out the program very diligently throughout this period. So we have been in constant communication with them over the last couple of months. We need to see how, in practical terms, Chevron might change the status quo in terms of the team that is following the project, the logistics, basically. So we hope that those. I mean, we're certainly on board to ensure that our government and ministry will provide all the support so that we can minimize any delays that may actually arise from that transition, and hopefully we will be able to do that without any major problems.
Thank you. Mr. Maniatis, any brief comment on anything you've heard so far?
Well, I think that following the discussion, I think that the basic result and one of the basic experiences after or during the pandemic COVID-19 in Europe is that our continent is fully dependent in many things. Europe is dependent on China for masks, on Russia for natural gas, on other countries for other basic products or services. So, from a geostrategic point of view, Europe should not anymore be so much dependent by third countries in all these basic products or services. Let me just say that even at the issue of storage, electricity storage in batteries, uh, the European industry is dependent on third countries in basic raw materials, even in rare materials. So the basic conclusion is not anymore so much dependence. Let me just give you two numbers about the dependency of Europe on natural gas. The 27 member states consume each year about 450 billion cubic meters, 450 BCM per annum. The European production is 109 billion cubic meters, which means that Europe imports by third countries more than about 350 billion cubic meters. 40% of these imports come from Asia, about 20% from Norway, and about 10% by Algeria. So we must decide as European Union, as countries, as European economies. Do we, can we afford our economies to be dependent on basic services or products by third countries, or we should improve, increase our production in order not to be so much dependent in these issues? My answer, and I think that this is also the answer of the European Commission and the European Bill, is that we should, even or more than in other issues, at the energy sector, be less dependent on imports of natural gas. Or we should have much more diversified sources and routes. And this is, for example, why Eastmed pipeline has its great geopolitical importance. It brings natural gas from a new source, follows a new route, and so it means that all these things give to the member states the possibility to be less dependent on natural gas by the traditional producer, who is Russia.
Thank you very much. So that leads into, I'm going to give the final word actually to Mr. Fannon, and that set up my final question to you, really. I mean, you've emphasised this, and others have too, that there's a large degree of bipartisanship on this question, energy issues, on 5G, on China in the US. By contrast, we see the 27 EU member states with actually quite divergent views on some of these questions. So are we heading actually for a world in which, a more bifurcated world in which EU member states will actually have to choose between one side or the other? And I guess in this instance, we're talking about choosing between China and the US on the question of 5G, on cybersecurity, and all these issues that you and others have raised. Is that where we're heading, do you think?
Well, I don't necessarily think that would be the result. Certainly not hope so, and that's not what the United States position would be. What we're calling for, though, is for there to be an awareness that of the very real threat that aligning your system to the Chinese Communist Party, controlled by the party, None of their businesses will actually function as transparent businesses. They're obligated, if asked by the party, to divulge all kinds of information. So there's a collection apparatus that's occurring. What I think, and the gentleman spoke to the issue of supply chains, and we've seen China's kind of mask diplomacy issues play out. I think that there was a couple of trends globally that existed prior to COVID. And we've seen in the post-COVID era, COVID served as an accelerant to some of those trends. And one of those trends was the concern of free societies, concern about the way the Chinese Communist Party acts and the way they behave, and that the way in which they approach business, not for business, but for other geopolitical objectives. China defines at the state level strategic industries, and then they incredibly put the entire weight of the state and state financing behind those industries to control them. One of those, was turning back to energy, is what China has sought to do, which is to decouple its way out of its reliance, effectively, on the U.S. Naval Protectorate in terms of oil coming through the Middle East. That also fuels into China's energy policies and their push for clean forms of energy and the control of supply chains for those clean forms of energy. That should be concerning to all of us. One of the just think of they put some of these battery technologies and some of these clean energies as strategic industries, as well as artificial intelligence. Now just think of it's a bit dystopian, but it's not far from the future. To be sitting driving around in an autonomous vehicle, 5G, which is controlled by Beijing. It kind of, we can go to dark places on what that future could look like, but it's right around the corner. And so the call of the United States, and I think the rest of the world is also alert to it, is if we're basing our societies according to shared values, transparency, the things that certainly exist, have predated for many, many years in the transatlantic relationship. If that's foundational, which I still, in the United States, still believes it is, then we should look at all things through that lens appropriately, and that should be the barometer through which we engage with other states.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and I greatly appreciate the fact that you've all stayed on. It's very late for you, all of you in Greece and Cyprus, and we needed to do that so that our friends in the US could follow the discussions today and obviously elsewhere in Europe. So we do greatly appreciate the fact that you've stayed on at this late hour. And thank you very much for your contributions. And as several speakers have said, we hope to meet again in person next year in New York and hold this summit. Once again, I hope that you'll all be able to join us there. So thanks again, and I'm signing off now. Thanks from The Economist to all our speakers, all the participants, and all our sponsors for this event. Have a good evening. Thank you, wherever you are, and good night.